Folks, we would like to continue, with our customer education session, and today we are actually meeting a very interesting executive, right, and from a very interesting company. Okay, the company is Messe Muenchen India, and we have Susanna Bashir, the Chief People Officer, joining us from Bombay, India. This is a global company, and she leads a very important function, for their India operations. Right. So welcome, Susanna. I would love to hear from you, right, more about the company, your operations in India, and of course, your role as well. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Senthil. Pleasure to be doing this session. To your first question, us as a company, we basically part of the trade fair industry. Trade fair industry in India it's a niche industry at this point. What we do primarily is we bridge the demand and the supply side of any particular sector, and we're creating a platform for them to meet and enabling meaningful handshakes likewise. So this is what we do in a nutshell. We are about 15 years old in India at this point, and our parent is almost about 60 years old at this point. That's what primarily we do as a company. My role in general, I currently spearhead the people and culture initiatives for Messe Muenchen India, and also a new unit that we've set up, which is for transformation. So these are the two pieces that I look at this point.
Great, awesome. And I've spoken to a bunch of people in your organization, and I know that it's a pretty complex business, right? In the sense that you need to conduct trade fairs, you need to bring in the two sides of the platform, right? You need to bring the footfall to the trade fair. You also need to bring in the people who sponsor and participate, right, as businesses there, right? So it's a pretty unique business, and we have just been over COVID and right all of that. So I'm assuming that it's been a very interesting time, right, for all of you in the organization. With that background, can you tell us a bit about OKRs? Right, in Messe Muenchen India, right? How did the idea of OKRs, come about, and how did you even decide that OKRs are important for you?
Sure. So this started way back in 21, and in fact, I joined the company at the fag end of 21, and essentially, like you rightly said, right, our primary business depends on people coming together. And that being said, pandemic was a classic time when we didn't have too much on our plate, and we were really wondering where are we at and what next, and how long will this sort of go on for. And in terms of the pandemic, and of course, a lot of businesses have had those kind of similar challenges. We interestingly use that downtime for trying to understand better about why do we exist. And that is where a very detailed exercise was being conducted on discovering our purpose, our values, what do we collectively reflect, where do we want to go, what is the relevance of our business, and various of those kind of things. We went into those kind of deep dives, and and we were using. At that point we had engaged a consultant to sort of partner with us on this discovery exercise. We also sort of went deeper into exercises of say when we go to the other side of this, how do we pursue hypergrowth, recovery and then hypergrowth? How do we pursue that? What are the best examples or best practices or methodologies that other hypergrowth companies are using at this point? And we realized, and that's where OKR as a methodology really came in. And that's why we started, out of all the pieces that came through, we started deliberating on the relevance of OKRs for us. Of course, it sounded interesting prima facie, but we wanted to understand the relevance of, does it really fit our business? Our business, like you rightly said, it's complex in a way that it's a multi-stakeholder environment. So you're meeting both the top decision makers of the demand side and the supply side of any particular sector. And likewise, we have multiple sectors that we cater to. So it's a multi-stakeholder environment, and hence understanding the relevance of something which primarily moves quarter on quarter as a short-term view is something that the deliberation was really on about. But as we went deeper into understanding what the entire concept offered and what was the end goal and how can it get us closer to the aspirations that we have, it became clear on why do we want to sort of deploy this internally. So the relevance became much more clear. That's how the buy-in started getting stronger. the conviction of why we want to do OKRs became stronger. And that's how the whole journey started.
That's awesome. And were you involved as an OKR captain, quite early in the journey?
So at the time when it was in the discovery phase of, okay, this is where we need OKRs, or rather, is this relevant for us? I was just entering MMI at that point. And, I understand the OKR concept from MMI. However, it was refreshing to try and understand the industry because I don't come from this industry. I have a versatile background, but this is an industry that sort of I had not tapped on before I came to MMI. So the idea was, it was interesting to understand what is it that we do, and how does OKR fit into this entire construct, and how does it help or add value to us? That is the time when I sort of came in.
Okay, awesome. That's great. And how did you find, the reception to OKRs among the leadership team, right? And how did it evolve? Right? Was it easy acceptance right away, or did it take some time for people to understand and have conviction and then accept and join the journey? How did that happen?
Sure. I would say we had mixed emotions. We had both people for and not for OKRs. Of course, that only helped us strengthen understanding the concept better, because the more the resistance, the better you sort of have, and you're answering that resistance, you have that sort of conviction of, does this really make sense for us? So I think that started evolving. So I'm glad we had, both sides of the thought processes and both sides of these emotions. And yes, it wasn't an easy sell. It still isn't, to be honest. Like I was, mentioning also to the other members of Profit, I would still consider us to be in the adoption stage. And that's where the buy-in still continues to, we still continue to basically make that sale.
Okay, got it. And in terms of adoption, right, and also in terms of, let's say, using a tool, did you first try to do it without a tool, let's say just using spreadsheets, or how did you go about doing it once you decided to implement?
Sure. So before we came into Profit, we were also we were getting some help from a consulting partner on partnering with us on discovering our vision, and that's where they also had an offering of OKR. That's why we got introduced to the fact that, okay, this is something, I'm talking about collectively MMI. We got introduced to the probability of not using spreadsheets and going directly to the tool. So between the two, of course, we've been trying to create some raw sketches on Excel and then taking them onto the system. We had to gather collectively our understanding on two pieces, one on the concept, the other on the technology. So both of these were happening parallelly, and while we were understanding the concept, a lot of Excel did get used to sort of draw some raw notes. But yes, ultimately the goal was, this is not. We had clarity on one thing for sure. We weren't looking for doing this on an Excel, and Excel was just a way to get to the tool. But the ultimate goal was to set this all up in the tool. Primarily also because OKR as a concept, our takeaways from that was it offers a higher level of clarity. The dependencies are clearly outlined, and there are various of these kind of elements within the OKR methodology, which the idea is better served of in an automated way versus looking at Excel.
Okay, got it. So, one of the reasons why you look for a tool was that you wanted to make sure that the dependencies are clearly defined and overall the workflow is set up properly, and hence you wanted to transition to a tool. Okay, got it.
And we always felt that the tool was more agile because Excel. The tool is always better because we're also looking at, in fact, integrating this with a couple of our internal systems. And of course, when we reach to that stage, the idea is to also explore that piece.
Right, got it. So for all those reasons, moving to a proper OKR tool makes sense than just sticking with Excel. And how was the selection process? How did you evaluate? Did you evaluate multiple products or multiple vendors, and before you selected Profitco? How did that process, went through? Yeah.
Sure. So we were using another tool prior to Profit, and while that was great, we came to a level where we wanted something which was a little more evolved on OKRs in itself. We started then. Let's put it this way: we failed at the first step. We, however, had enough conviction by then that this is something that we need to do. And hence we started evaluating tools, and that's where Profit came up as one of the solutions. So the other solutions in the mix that we were looking at did not have OKR as the primary focus, but OKR was bundled into various of the other features that it had to offer. So our journey started there, where we failed once. We then, because of our conviction and the resistance that we had, and that made our conviction stronger, we realized that we need to switch to a different tool. And that's where we started discussions with Profit. What we realized about Profit is it was OKR heavy. I think that's where my understanding of Profit is that you've understood the key fix of that's needed in an organization, and then now you're layering other solutions over and above it. So that was the merit that we saw.
Sure, that's remarkable, and thanks for that. Yes, Profitco was built ground up, specifically for OKRs, and it's not an add-on, to other things, right? Which it's a thing which many of our other friends do. But I think it's a great point that you mentioned that the first iteration, it was not a remarkable success, right? It was a failure, as you candidly put it. Okay, but just for educating the audience, would you like to tell what failed and what were the reasons for the failure? How did you reflect upon it, and how did you build on it, actually? Yeah.
Sure. So I think one of the primary reasons of that failure was and I would also say that the initial few years, the initial some time of Profit was also, I would consider it part of the same failure to some degree, because we were trying to get it perfect. I think what we were aiming for is a new methodology, which of course, takes care of the challenges that we currently have, and we can convert those into opportunities of clarity. However, we were trying to get it perfect. I think that is what was one of the causes of the failures that I quoted. The other is also it was quite early in at that time from a concept perspective too, right? And of course, in terms of what was available to understand OKRs was also there was minimal information. Of course, the concept started getting popularized, and it, to some degree, it started becoming a fad that, okay, now we're sort of deploying OKRs, right? But we've got to understand that it may not be relevant for everyone. It could be, it could not be, correct? So I think that initial phase of clarity, deliberations, trying to get the system perfect versus starting on it with, the minimal value that it has to offer and jump on the boat and then make it perfect. I think that was somewhere the part that we were missing. Also, what evolved is from our learnings, right? We failed, we learned, and then we started understanding what is it that we need to do better to be able to, for it, the whole methodology to make more sense to us and be of greater value to us. So these were initial few things. I would also like to compliment the Profit team, who actually understood and empathized that, okay, there's a mixed bag of people. It's not a methodology ever done in this industry or adopted in this industry, and that I can say that Messe Muenchen is one of the first few to be able to use this. I think the Profit team empathized with that understanding and guided the way forward, made it simple for us to jump on board, and that's how the journey started picking up.
Sure. That's a very outstandingly unique insight that you just shared, that, one of the reasons for failure is that, trying to be perfect, right? That's a pretty unique insight. And if you're okay, can you expand on it? In what ways you were trying to be, perfect, right? Was it that everybody should have OKRs, and was it like quality of OKRs in are too frequent check-ins? What do you mean by perfect? Trying to be perfect? Yeah.
Sure. So when I say perfect, I mean to say the quality of OKRs that we were trying to write. And for example, and one of the other things, so say in the OKR methodology, you're actually taking a long-term vision. You're breaking it down into smaller fragments of, okay, how do you get to this vision, right? And that's how the entire evolution of quarterly breakdowns and all of these pieces really come into play, correct? I think we were getting stuck on, have we captured everything at the vision side, right? And have we been able to fragment everything into OKRs? and then also obsessing about, are the quality of OKRs well? I think we were, when I say we were trying to make it perfect, it was these kind of things that we essentially were trying to do. And the idea of sharing it with everybody is that is one of the spiral that one can potentially get into when trying to drive a new methodology as an adoption. What we did differently in recent times is we are driving it at two levels. One is at the concept level, the other is at the tool level. At the tool level, we are telling people, and we just bringing them in that at least start using it. And the way we're doing that is there are interesting features in Profit which are other than OKRs, which is tasks, which is the performance management features and various of those kind of things. So our idea is, okay, let's bring people to the tool. That's one part of the piece, and they let people get used to using Profit. Right? That's how we started the tool adoption. And on the concept adoption, we've been doing a lot of trainings, a lot of micro learning episodes that we're trying to. We also got our entire senior leadership team certified on OKRs, right? Because any adoption of which has an impact like this has to be driven top down. So that's why we got the entire leadership team certified on OKRs. So from where we were to what we're doing differently in recent times, this has been a journey.
Yeah, I think that's quite mind-blowing, I would say. Particularly the way you differentiated the adoption, right, between concept and tool, right, and what you're really doing, on both the lines. It's a very measured, I would say, and a very holistic approach, right? I've not had too many people explain, that in a way that you just did, right? So I really appreciate that. So you mentioned upon one very important thing, right? That there was, executive sponsorship, right? And that was pretty important. Right? Can you tell us a bit more about, for this increasing this adoption, while you're very beautifully put these two different types of adoption, and you mentioned about executive sponsorship. What are the things that you did, even in executive sponsorship? What exactly did you do to improve adoption?
Sure. I think one of the things that works for us very well on this is the leadership that's driving India subsidiary. So this comes from our CEO. He himself is very tuned to how can we make things simple and how can we make things better, right? And because there is already a preset buy-in there, let's put it this way, my life becomes a little simpler because I don't need to seek that buy-in, correct? So the good thing is we're aligned on that fact top down. And I think the leadership team sees the value of what OKRs can do. And that is, I think, one of the things that we wanted to achieve, the buy-in from the entire leadership team. So while there was a buy-in from the top executive and from someone like me who had to take this concept and sort of drive the adoption at the company, the idea was, how do we get everyone in the leadership team aligned to this? So things that we did is, of course, having a lot of the discussions around the merits of what this has to offer. I think once that clarity comes, it's a separate story of, okay, how do we do it, right? That comes next. So we focused on what are the merits of doing this, and then getting the leadership team aligned, getting them certified, helping them understand what the concept was all about, and that we don't have to get it perfect. I think that's what we started talking more about, that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get started, and we'll get, we fine tune it as we go. So that is what we've done to sort of bring in more of that leadership team buy-in.
Okay, that's quite a stellar insight again, is that, you really talked about the merits, right? Which is essentially telling people why we are doing it, right? Why OKRs at Messe Muenchen India, right? Why are we doing it? And that when it comes from the executive sponsor, the CEO who has completely bought it, right? Then that makes your role as an OKR captain simpler, like what you put it. But now coming back, to your role as an OKR captain, right? How do you see your role, right? What did you do during the initial stages? What do you do now, to keep the program moving? And, I know a lot of OKR captains out there, they're really looking forward to learn, from somebody like you. Yeah.
Sure, sure. So to keep the program moving, Senthil, essentially, one is, the concept understanding, because it's new, and that's where I was actually talking about it being a legacy industry. We are used to a certain way of doing things, correct? So for anything new to come in, it is unlearning and then learning a whole new methodology altogether,
Mm.
correct? So hence a lot of time being invested to coach people and mentor people in understanding what it is all about. So continuous internal communication delivery of merits of OKR. How should we jump on the wagon by understanding some part of it and then breaking down our understanding in different phases? So the idea is, let's not try to understand the whole concept at one shot, but how do we break this down into smaller pieces even about the concept and try to understand that better. For example, if we don't you don't have to get all everything objective on the KR side at the first go. You don't have to adopt it for all departments at the first go. You don't have to break down your entire strategy at the first go. It could be broken down into pieces, maybe identify those pieces of pockets. That's what's actually helped us. So identifying those few pieces where we could drive this, where the understanding is slightly more clear. And we've started taking that and using that as the pilot and the success mechanism, early success mechanism for this.
Sure.
So that's
That's
how
a,
we've
yeah,
been,
sorry.
so that's how we've been actually, and the concept understanding also already once done, but I think we are keeping that as a continual process versus finishing that with the 1-2 training. So we keeping the learning continuous, we keeping the conversation about OKRs continuous. What we're essentially trying to do is treating this as something that can become part of the DNA of MMI. What do I mean by that? I mean, anything that we're doing, any review that we are doing, the idea is, how do we get to a stage that for everything we only go to this one tool? It becomes a consolidation space for everything that we're doing. Because that is when the adoption generally is more solid. Otherwise, it's very porous if people have to go into too many places to find different things to get clarity about their role. So I think consolidating that entire effort, breaking it down into easier fragments, that's something that we've been aiming at.
Sure. I think that's again, a very, I would say, remarkable insight that you just shared, right? As an OKR captain, you do continuous education, right? And you make sure, during reviews, right? You use OKRs and Profit.co for reviews, right? And that is, in fact, absolutely, I would say, the number one thing we recommend people, that, if you do your reviews, then people are automatically going to check in, right? Because they know that reviews are happening regularly, and then check-ins are hence important. Now that leads us to the next question, right? While implementing OKRs and Profit.co, do you have what is your internal best practice? And I also liked what you mentioned, that you're trying to get it into the DNA of the organization, right? That's a thing which I will probably steal and use in other places. That's a beautiful way of putting it. But in terms of checking in and reviews frequency, right, within the business, what's the rhythm that you've gotten comfortable with, and what are you going to continue? How often do you check in? How often do reviews happen?
So for us, Senthil, the nature of business is such that it's more annuity in nature. So, for example, our trade fairs that happen for every sector. We largely have it either once or twice in the year. So for us, it's to see the reflection of what is happening on OKRs as an end goal. It actually takes some time before we see that, right? Given that scenario of the business, our check-ins are modified to each KPI. So each KR and the KPI defined within it. We've understood how often can we actually review this. For example, something like say increasing our customer success score. That is something that we will only understand because our product is not being consumed every day, right?
Right.
We will only understand that at the time of the show and when the show gets done, right? So trying to not use a very cut pace approach, but what we've done is every element of OKR, we've tried to see how can we increase the relevance for our business, and that's how we've been fine-tuning it. So the check-ins, likewise, if you see at an overall score level, of course, we have the cockpit that talks about the overall score. but it's a culmination of different KPIs. Some would be checked in weekly, some would be checked in monthly. Some we've also defined quarterly, and we understand that for a few, we'll need a year to be able to see what's happening.
Sure. And interesting that you mentioned OKR Cockpit, right? And also the fact that it's a great practice that you're doing, which is being flexible about the check-ins depending upon the key result, right? And the example that you gave is pretty good. That if an event happened only once in a year, right, and I want to really get the feedback after the event, right? That's the most important thing. While we can get continuous feedback, but for your business, right, you are doing whatever makes sense. Absolutely, right. And now you mentioned about OKR Cockpit. How do you use Cockpit as an OKR captain? How is it useful for you? How do you make use of it? Yeah.
Sure. I think the OKR Cockpit, I've seen it from the time where it was slightly lesser evolved to what it is now. And, your team has been helpful to sort of get us through those changes. What we use the cockpit for is essentially looking at an overview in terms of the fulfillment. Where are we going with the fulfillment? There are two things. One is, the adoption of OKRs, which is one of the success metric of the program for us. And the other, which is the fulfillment using OKRs as a tool, right? So we are trying to look at these two as key factors for understanding if OKRs for us is successful and how successful is the program running. So that's how we're using the cockpit. One is to understand the overall level of how often are people coming to the tool, how often are they checking in, what's the quality of check-in. We're looking at all of those factors. We are also looking at the fulfillment score, right? Now, that's an interesting insight that we get from the fulfillment. Now, so if you go deeper into why a fulfillment of, say, a particular team is lower, we're coming up with two insights. One, either the quality of OKR has not been written well, and hence there are metrics that we're looking at, which actually you cannot measure the fulfillment in the way it's drafted right now, but it needs to be drafted differently. So we get to questioning that. So one is the fulfillment score via the cockpit is helping us improve the quality of OKRs that we're writing. Second is the fulfillment score is also, of course, helping us understand how far off are we from what we're trying to achieve aspirationally. So the cockpit is giving us interesting insights, and those insights we're interestingly using to better our program at the same time, see where we're at. It, of course, has a whole bunch of other insights in terms of who's adopting, who's using it, and who's not, and how can people be helped with. It helps us cluster people in terms of early adopters, users who are on and off, having a yo-yo effect, and then users who are just not at it. It helps us cluster people in these buckets and then have very tailored approaches to sort of mentor these buckets and drive the adoption with these buckets.
That's awesome. And earlier you also mentioned that, for the tool adoption, you are doing a few things, right? By asking people to use not just OKRs, but use tasks along with OKRs and use performance management as well. And can you expand a little bit on, usage of tasks, for example, right? How do you use tasks and, how has it helped?
Sure. So I think we started using tasks with the idea of how do we bring people to the tool. What is it that they understand already? So OKR as a concept is really new to a lot of people in the organization. However, if you look at certain elements within OKRs, they are not new, correct? Classic example being tasks. I mean, all of us have used various of mechanisms to manage our to-do list, our task, and all of that. The merit we enjoy with Profit and bundling the task module with the OKR is that if OKR is a subject that one still does not completely grasp, they can at least start using task, and we made that simpler for them. So we sort of de-linked the two, and we started bringing in workspaces and using the task module to just simply move your offline list online, right? That's how we started making it simple. So we broke down the tool adoption. We've broken down actually the tool adoption into multiple smaller fragments. So task is one such example, which there's nothing in the concept to understand. People know it. There's an actionable, there's a timeline, there's a person responsible. So it's very simple that way. So we're getting people used to and using that as a key element for people to use. So yeah, that's how the task module is served as. The beauty of that is because the tool is built the way it is, it goes back and sort of nest under certain OKRs. So when people are looking at that as an outcome, that okay, we took a simple thing and oh, this is how it links to the bigger concept. Okay, now we get it. It makes it simpler to sort of drive the concept using these few. So they're already successful at one part of what they're doing within the concept. That also gives them confidence to do the other part and understand the broader concept.
It's a brilliant insight, right? You're in multiple ways. Right? When people are moving towards an unknown, which is OKRs, right? You are trying to make it easy by, first starting with something which they're very familiar with and which you very eloquently put as, offline to online, moving the tasks, right? And also the second concept that you just mentioned, which is, give people, some early wins, right? Small wins, right? Where they are able to get things done with tasks and hence they are motivated enough to explore more, which is OKRs. And also, I think I really liked how you put it that, tasks get nested under OKRs, right? Key results, right? That's a pretty fabulous way of explaining it, right? Thanks a lot. Now, also in the tool, do you use, apart from Cockpit, do you use other features, to see the adoption, and fulfillment, right? Fulfillment is super important. Any reports, dashboards, heat maps, anything that what else do you use, Susan? Okay.
Sure. So the department heat map is one thing that we use in addition to the Cockpit to be able to try and understand which leader do we need to sort of work with a little more relatively than the other to sink in that concept. Because like I was also mentioning earlier, any new concept or any behavior change that you would want to drive, it actually happens from the top, and usually that's the most successful route where the leaders are, making themselves as an example and leading by example, right? So we use the heat maps quite a bit to understand that. We are also we are using one of the interesting features of allied features of Profit, which is the performance management tool. And that has a lot of, it offers the 9-box matrix, which again helps us give an overview at a company level, gives us an overview of where do our hypos stand, and it gives us that element. So various of these factors is what are indicators of what is happening at the organization level in terms of the concept and the tool both.
Sure, that's awesome. And we are going to segue into performance management, and thanks a lot for bringing it up. But before that, just a couple of questions. One, what has been the impact of OKRs? How long you've been working with OKRs, and what has been the overall impact of OKRs that you see in the organization? Yeah.
Sure. We introduced the concept of OKRs in 2021. However, like I said, we did fail, and a few initial months at Profit also. Let's put it this way: we failed at driving the adoption because we were trying to perfect the system, as I mentioned earlier. So it's in 23. However, we've got a pretty good grasp of how it operates and what it does. We are still trying to work with taking it to near perfection, but that's something which is a journey in itself, right? Currently, the value of OKRs that we see is at least there is complete understanding that this is one place. There is a complete understanding of the value that it offers, which earlier was not so wide spread, but now I think the value is understood because there are a few success examples there. There's a lot of view of what the probability of looking at this at 100% would be. Consolidation is one of the big merits that it offers, where I think there are a lot of different pockets of work that happens across in the organization. However, how do we bring all of that to one place in a consolidated way, where it offers transparency to even the other stakeholders who are not probably part of a particular success project, right? So it's offering that consolidation, that clarity. It is also offering a lot of alignment to us at this point as a value because of the transparency and the ability to break down the entire vision into smaller fragments of what we'd like to sort of do, it helps us fine-tune our roadmap of how do we want to achieve something that we'd like to achieve. So I think it's offering those kind of values to us at this point. A clear ROI, I would say we still have a long way in our journey to sort of try and identify that.
Sure, awesome, and that's quite candid and very, very helpful. The value, that realization that you have mentioned, right, which is that you're seeing better alignment, you are seeing consolidation of everything in one place, right? That all the goals, you are able to track that, and great transparency for even people who are not directly part of the program. They are able to see how the progress is happening. All of these are I would say amazing value, and thanks a lot for sharing that. And now, okay, we've been doing OKRs for nearly 3 years, with probably a rejuvenation from 23 onwards, right? And you're seeing a much surer foot from 23 onwards. Now, you also mentioned that you have started to implement performance management, right? So how did that come about? How did you think about doing performance management as well? I know you've always been doing performance management, but with Profitco, how did you try to bring that in? And we will ask some more questions about how OKRs and PMS fit, performance management fit together, right, in Messe Muenchen.
That's an interesting one, because I think all through the concept training and, no matter what blog and what video you pick on OKRs, it will tell you one thing, that do not connect this with performance management, right? We started questioning the why of their theory, because while we understand OKR is for the aspirational side of what we'd like to do, performance is more realistic in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we could see a clear bridge between what's realistic and what's aspirational, correct? Mm-hmm. And we could see a clear bridge about if your vision is not aspirational, the realistic is always going to be somewhere there, but not really at, you're not pushing the envelope on it, right? Unless or until you're driving it closer to the aspirational value. So we understood that, and we questioned the theory. We questioned the status quo that it could have created, that, okay, this is a no-go area amongst the do's and don'ts. But we said, why not, right? Ultimately, if say a person is participating in aspirational projects, that has to be celebrated, that has to be part of the performance evaluation. Of course, being very cautious that it shouldn't discourage people from being aspirational, because it's connected to performance. And that's why we've again taken, we've broken down what we want to do in smaller steps. So firstly, of course, we decided to go defy the theory a bit, and we said, okay, let's try, right? And the good thing is we wanted to move our complete performance management system into one space. The idea was that people don't have to go into different places to see what they are aligned to do, and how are they doing at that. So the idea was to hence align OKRs and performance management both, because like I said, there is a clear bridge between the realistic and the aspirational. Now, we broke down this into, again, smaller fragments, where the idea was, in the tool, there is a way where you don't have to 100% depend on OKRs, but you can add an element of goals, you can add an element of competencies. We brought those elements in because, we were being cautious. We didn't want to get people to fear OKRs. We wanted them to consider that this is your best friend, and this is going to be an important part of your day. We didn't want them to fear it, right? So yeah, breaking that down again into fragments. So in 23, in fact, our entire performance management has happened on the tool itself. And the Profit team has been very helpful in being able to implement that in a shorter duration. We did have other tools that we were considering, but the idea was to not go into different systems at all.
Okay, awesome. And I think I really like your approach of defying, conventional wisdom, right? And experimenting yourselves. Pretty much I would call it as a, going back to first principles, right? First principles approach, right? Where you don't have to accept the conventional wisdom and you do what works for you, right? I mean, so it's a pretty remarkable approach. And performance management, were you always doing it annual, and do you continue to do it annual, or are you doing it using any hybrid approach? What has been your approach to performance management itself?
Sure. So traditionally, we've been using performance management using the balance scorecard and the KRA method, using SMART goals to be able to manage how teams are doing. But it was doing it was doing well in pockets. So now MBO, we understand while it has its merits to offer, it is more, the methodology is more tuned to what a particular person's role is and or the person is supposed to do, and then it sort of breaks that down into your smart elements, right? With OKR, it's different. With OKR, it is about what is it as an organization that we'd like to do, and hence how are we aligning everybody to see that one vision and one purpose. So I think this was what we used to do traditionally at MMI, and how we sort of changed that around with OKRs.
Got it. Okay. And now, when you implemented performance management with Profitco, what was the feedback from, employees, managers, your own team, the people team? What was the feedback?
Sure. So prior to this, we weren't using a lot of automation at MMI to do performance management. It was happening in a very crisp manner, but it was happening out of a system. It was happening and managed largely with Excels. Now, I come from a background of automation, and hence the idea was this is definitely something that we need to make redundant and move to a system. So I think one was getting everyone tuned to the idea of that behavior change. So that was one element of what we were trying to drive. It was well received. I think the ability for it to simplify what was, the way they were sort of, so at the end of the day, even the internal users are your internal customers, right? So when we simplified things for them, I think they could see the value in what this offers, the value that this offers. So that simplification helped us a lot. So it was initially there was a little bit of a pushback, but I think when people started seeing how simple it is, it started becoming easier. And I think now for the coming times, we don't know another way of how to do it if not automated. So let's put it that way, where the users are now tuned to, if we are not doing it in an automated way, okay, what is the alternate? So that's where we are at.
That's amazing, and it looks like you've taken this into the DNA of the organization, as you had put it before, right? That's awesome. Now, you also mentioned one very interesting insight, which was that while OKRs are aspirational, performance management is realistic, right? That's a beautiful insight. Now, how do you balance these two, right? Because the I would say the conventional wisdom is that, hey, if you grade OKRs and PMS together, then people are maybe not going to put aspirational goals out there, right? In OKRs, right? So how do you avoid that in Messe Muenchen India?
Sure. The way to avoid that is, again, ensuring that the psyche of people who are using this is people who would not want to be fearful about, dreaming big or aspiring big, right? So that, of course, we understand that is our end goal. At the same time, when you say realistic, right? Now, realistic could have different benchmarks. Something that's realistic for you versus what's realistic for me there could be a difference in how we're looking at that, right? The beauty of OKRs is now we are, as a company, we are very oriented to our purpose. So for us, our purpose is primarily a North Star that we're looking at, and we try and align everything that we're doing in our organization with that purpose. What OKRs does is it offers us to see our purpose with that aspiration. But to get to that purpose, you have to make some realistic goals in being able to get there, correct? Now, these goals, if you push the envelope, get a little closer to the aspiration sometimes. And of course, sometimes there's also a pushback of, this is not realistic and hence should not be aimed at. Now, in OKRs, of course, when we're using this in the system, we have an opportunity to define what's realistic and what's aspirational, which I think helps us understand and helps people understand that well noted. We understand, there's something that's realistic and there's something that's aspirational. Let's aim for the aspirational, but we understand if you're getting closer to what's realistic. So we have room to play around internally with being okay if you're dreaming big and you're probably hitting it closer, but you've not achieved it all. I think culturally we're okay to dream big because we allow everyone to participate in, okay, how do we get there? And second, despite everything, if we are not getting there, we are trying to understand, okay, how do we do it the next time versus that having a repercussion in a way. So the aspirational part is not leading to repercussions, and I think that's what's helping us somewhere.
Okay, that's pretty remarkably put, I would say. Right, one is that Messe Muenchen is a purpose-driven organization, and then, as you beautifully put, purpose is a North Star. Whether you are having aspirational OKRs or whether it is realistic performance reviews, right? It's all driven by the purpose and a North Star. I mean, that's amazing, and I really like the way you put it that aspirational goals are not going to have repercussions in performance management, right? And also you brought out the point where the tool allows you to put both committed, what we call this, you can committed or stretch, right? You can define both these goals, right? Realistic or aspirational, as the way you put it, and you can label them. Right? These are committed goals or realistic goals, whichever way you want to put it, and that's quite brilliant. Now, within performance management, like you did with OKRs, in performance management, what aspects of the tool have you found to be useful and helpful for you, Susanna?
Sure. So in performance management, I think one of the things that we found very helpful was the ability to break this down, break the reviews down based on OKRs, goals, and competencies, right? Because that's where we bring the fear factor down of OKRs and increase the goals and the competencies evaluation of on those parameters higher. So I think that one feature has been very helpful for us in being able to provide that mix in the review format. The other piece that I think has helped us a lot in the performance management feature is the ability for it to be able to give us an output in forms of, say, 9-box and create developmental plans there. So I think that has been very useful because one is the format. It addresses the format. It also addresses the output. And of course, everything in between from the process, which is the entire workflow moving seamlessly from self to the reporting head to the matrix manager. I think those features are very helpful because it offers a lot of configurations and hence makes it very relevant for any company to adopt this for themselves versus feeling the need that, okay, for any change that I need to customize it, right? So I think that's one of the beauties that we enjoy in the system, where it's highly configurable versus feeling the need to customize. So the performance management, I think it hence is relevant for, if I go back and think about all the companies that I've worked with and sectors that I've worked with, I can easily place this in all of those.
Okay, that's pretty stellarly put, I would say, right? The fact that the system is configurable, easy to use, the workflows are configurable, right? You want to do self-manager and then matrix manager, as you put, almost like 360-degree reviews, goals, competencies, that's amazing. Probably one last question is that, since you come from a people background, right? For a lot of people, the performance management process is riddled with, their perception of biases, right? So they think that, hey, there's a recency bias or, there's, all sorts of biases could be there. Now, with OKRs and performance management together, do you see that element of, let's say, concern of employees being addressed with how you are using Profitco and performance management?
To a large extent, yes. And the reason why I say that is not just the OKRs, but say even for companies who sort of want to continue to look at OKRs as a methodology for chasing the aspirational, and they're using, say, a separate methodology like maybe MBO for driving performance. Even for those kind of companies, I think there is a relevance because the tool offers hosting both of these into the system, right? So clearly, yeah, I think there is a relevance for a lot of companies from that perspective.
Sure. So, Susanna, thank you very much for this discussion, and this has been one of the very insightful interviews, and I could go for another hour, but we have run out of time, sure. Right? I really appreciate your insights, and I'm sure audiences are going to find this super helpful, right? So really, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Senthil. I'm glad and honored to be part of this conversation.